She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. You didn't need to come up here, Lorraine. We've got it handled. I was standing in my own kitchen, the kitchen where I had cooked 37 Thanksgiving dinners, the kitchen where I taught my son how to make biscuits from scratch when he was 7 years old, flour on his nose, proud as anything. And my daughter-in-law, my son's wife of 14 months, was leaning against my counter with a glass of my wine, telling me I didn't need to be there. I smiled. I said, "Of course, honey." I poured myself a glass of water and walked back to the living room, where I sat in the armchair that used to be mine, but somehow no longer felt like it. That was the moment I should have said something. I know that now. My name is Lorraine, and I am 63 years old, and I am not a foolish woman. I spent 28 years as an office administrator for a civil engineering firm in Columbus, Ohio. I managed budgets, I managed people, I managed Pisces. I was the person everyone called when something fell apart. So when I tell you that I let things go on the way they did, for almost 2 years, I want you to understand something. It wasn't because I was stupid. It wasn't because I didn't see it coming. It was because his name was Walter, and he was my son, and I would have walked through fire to keep him from hurting. Walter is my only child. I had him at 31 after 2 miscarriages that I don't talk about much. When he was born, the doctor put him on my chest, and he looked up at me with those dark eyes, and I thought, this is the thing I was made for. His father, my husband Raymond, cried in the corner of the hospital room, which was the only time in 22 years of marriage I ever saw him cry. Raymond passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. Walter and I got through it the way you get through something like that. Badly. Slowly. Together. After Raymond, I kept the house in Gahanna. 4 bedrooms, a yard with a garden I still tend every spring. A screened porch where Raymond and I used to sit with our coffee on Sunday mornings. The mortgage was paid off. I had Raymond's life insurance, my pension from the firm, and my own savings. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. Stable. My financial advisor, Mr. Kepner, over at Huntington, told me I could retire at 62 and be just fine, and that's exactly what I did. So when Walter called me in March 2 years ago and said he and his wife Trina were having some trouble, that his landscaping business had hit a rough patch, that they were behind on rent, that it was just temporary, I didn't hesitate. I told him to come home. I want to be honest about Trina from the beginning, because I think it matters. I never disliked her. Not at first. She was 31, sharp, had good posture and a firm handshake, and laughed a little too loudly at her own jokes. She worked in medical billing. She was perfectly fine. I thought she was a bit cool with me. A little too careful, the way some people are when they're deciding how much to give you. But I told myself that was just nerves. Moving in with your mother-in-law is not easy for anyone. I wanted to give her the room to be comfortable. I gave them the guest bedroom, which was the second largest room in the house. My bedroom, the primary, has its own bathroom, a walk-in closet, and 2 windows that look out over the backyard garden. Raymond built a window seat in there when Walter was small, so I could sit and look out at the yard while I read. That room was mine. I never considered any other arrangement. The first month was fine. Better than fine, actually. Walter helped me fix the gutter on the north side of the house that had been loose since the fall. Trina cooked dinner twice a week. She made a good chicken piccata, I'll give her that. We watched television together in the evening sometimes. It felt, for those first few weeks, like family. Then small things started shifting. It began with the throw pillows. I had a set of cream and blue pillows in the living room that I'd had for years. One afternoon I came home from my friend Nadine's house, and the pillows were gone, replaced with a set of grey and terracotta ones that looked like they came from one of those discount home stores. When I asked Trina about it, she said, oh, she'd found them at TJ Maxx and thought they brightened up the space, wasn't that okay? I said, sure, it seems small. 3 weeks later, the framed family photos that had hung in the hallway, Walter at his high school graduation, Raymond and me on our 25th anniversary, Walter's first Little League game, were gone. In their place was a set of 3 abstract prints in thin black frames. Trina had bought them from some online shop. She'd rehung everything in a box in the hall closet. I took the photos out of the closet and put them back in the hallway myself, in the exact spots they'd been in for 15 years. I didn't say a word. She took them down again the following week. I started writing things down after that. I'd picked up the habit from my years at the firm. When things start to slip, you document. I bought a small spiral notebook, red cover, and I kept it in my nightstand drawer. Every time something happened, I wrote the date, what was changed, and approximately what it would cost to replace or restore. I told myself I was being organized. Sensible. I didn't let myself think too hard about why I felt I needed to be. In June, Walter came to me and said Trina wanted to redecorate the guest bathroom. I said that was fine, as long as they paid for it themselves and didn't do anything structural. He looked a little relieved when I said that, which I noticed. He said, of course, absolutely. They'd handle everything. 2 weeks later, I came home to find the whole bathroom, not the guest bathroom, my whole bathroom, completely repainted in a dark olive green. The towel racks had been switched out. The mirror was gone, replaced by a smaller round mirror with a wooden frame. My towels, the good cream-colored ones I'd had for 8 years, were in a bag by the door. I stood in that hallway for a long moment. Then I went and knocked on their bedroom door. Walter answered. I said, very calmly, I said, I believe there was some confusion. I said you could do the guest bathroom. This is my bathroom. Walter looked uncomfortable. He said Trina had just gotten inspired, that she hadn't meant anything by it, that it looked great. Didn't it look great? Didn't it look great? Trina appeared behind him. She said, the old colors were so dated, Lorraine. I thought you'd be happy about it. I said, please restore it to how it was, or I will hire someone to do so and take it out of the household expenses. There was a short, cold silence. Then Trina said, sure, fine, whatever. She said it the way teenagers say it. They're fine, that means everything but fine. They did not restore it. I hired a painter. It cost me $340. I wrote it in the red notebook. I want to tell you about the money, because I think people need to understand what I'm actually talking about when I say rough patch. Walter's landscaping business had lost 2 commercial contracts in the same quarter, a property management company that had gone under, and a school district that had cut its maintenance budget. His personal credit was stretched. He and Trina had been paying $1,450 a month for their apartment in Westerville. When they moved in with me, that payment went away. I did not charge them rent. I covered the utilities. I bought most of the groceries. In August, Walter asked if I could loan him $4,000 to cover insurance and equipment for the business. I transferred the money from my savings account the same day. I did not ask for a promissory note, which was my mistake, and I knew it was my mistake when I did it, and I did it anyway. I wrote it in the red notebook. In October, Trina mentioned over dinner that she'd been looking at furniture. The living room sofa was old, which was true. Raymond and I had bought it when Walter was in middle school, and she'd found a sectional she loved. I said I wasn't in the market for new furniture right now. She said she'd found one for a really reasonable price. I said thank you, but no. The sofa was gone when I came home from a doctor's appointment 2 weeks later. In its place was a large grey sectional that took up 2/3 of the living room. My old sofa, which had no resale value, I understood that, but which my late husband had sat on every Sunday for 15 years, was gone. Trina said she donated it. She said it in a way that expected me to thank her. I did not thank her. I called Walter at work. He said he'd thought I'd like it, that Trina had handled everything, that the new one was very comfortable. He sounded like he was reading from a script. I had known that boy since before he could walk, and I could hear the discomfort in every word. My son was not a bad man. He was a man who had learned to keep the peace by giving ground. And he had run out of ground that was his to give, and had started giving mine. I wrote down the sofa in the red notebook. By January, the total I had documented between the loan, the groceries beyond what I'd budgeted for myself, the painter, and several other smaller items came to just over $11,000 in 8 months. That number sat in my chest like a stone. I hadn't counted the rent they weren't paying because that had been my choice from the beginning. But $11,000, that was real. The moment I had known was coming, the moment I think I had been both dreading and waiting for, if I'm honest, came on a Saturday evening in March. My neighbor and dear friend Patrice was turning 65, and her daughter had organized a small celebration at Patrice's house a few blocks over. I'd offered to host instead since my house was larger, and Patrice had said yes, she'd love that. We planned it for weeks. 8 women, all of us from the old neighborhood. Most of us who'd known each other since our children were small. I had bought good wine, made my grandmother's lemon pound cake, arranged for Chinese takeout from Fortune Garden on Hamilton Road because Patrice loved their sesame chicken. I was in my bedroom getting dressed when I heard voices downstairs that were not Patrice's. I came down to find Trina in my living room, surrounded by 6 people I had never seen, laughing loudly, music on, a bottle of Prosecco open on my coffee table. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Trina saw me. She did not look embarrassed. She said, "Oh, we're having a few people over. We figured your thing was just coffee and stuff. There's plenty of room." I said, "Trina, I have 8 women coming here in 45 minutes for a birthday dinner. We discussed this. This is Patrice's party." She looked at me the way you look at someone who has said something mildly inconvenient. She said, "Well, we're already here. I'm sure you can fit everyone. It'll be fun." One of her guests, a young woman I'd never seen before, laughed, just a quick, reflexive laugh, and then looked away. I stood very still. I am 63 years old. I have buried a husband. I have sat in a financial advisor's office alone and reorganized my entire future without falling apart. I am not a woman who is easy to rattle. But standing in my own living room, looking at strangers sitting on furniture I had not chosen, listening to music I had not put on, I felt something shift in me that did not shift back. I said calmly, "This is my house. I need you and your guests to leave before 6 o'clock. Trina said, "Lorraine, don't be dramatic." I said 6 o'clock and I went back upstairs. I called Walter. He didn't answer. I texted him. He didn't respond for 40 minutes. By the time he did, it was 20 minutes before my guests arrived. Trina's friends were still there, and all he said was that I needed to try to get along with Trina, that she was just trying to be social, that he'd talk to her later. I read that text 3 times. Then I put my phone down on my bed, and I sat in the window seat Raymond built me, and I looked out at the garden, at the rose bushes I had planted the spring after he died, because I needed something living to tend to, and I made a decision, not an angry decision, not an impulsive one, a quiet, settled decision, the kind that come from somewhere very deep and very calm inside you. Patrice's party was lovely as it turned out. Trina and her friends drifted out just before 6, not because I said anything more, but because the room had shifted. You can feel when someone's authority has returned to them, even when nothing has been said. We ate the sesame chicken and drank the wine and sang happy birthday, and it was a good evening. But I was somewhere else in my head for most of it. I was planning. The following Monday morning, I called my attorney. Her name is Deborah, and I have used her for estate documents and the house paperwork after Raymond passed, and she is excellent. I told her everything, the undocumented loan, the alterations to the property, the documentation I had been keeping since June. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate about Deborah. When I finished, she said, "Lorraine, you have more leverage than you think." She walked me through what my rights were as the sole homeowner with no formal lease in place, month-to-month informal occupancy, meaning I could give 30 days written notice at any time. She also said the property alterations, depending on cost and whether I chose to pursue it, could be considered damage to property. She said the undocumented loan was harder, but not impossible if I had text messages or emails referencing it, which I did. I spent the rest of that week gathering everything: bank transfer records, receipts, photographs I had taken of the changed bathroom, the changed hallway, the removed furniture, the red notebook, which had 51 entries by then. I made copies of everything and kept one set at Patrice's house and one set in my car. Then I wrote the letter. 30 days notice to vacate. Formal, polite, and very clear. I had Deborah review it before I printed it. She changed 2 words and said the rest was fine. I left it on the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in April, under Walter's coffee mug so he would see it first. I was sitting in the screened porch with my own coffee when Walter came out. He was still in his work clothes. He'd had an early job, and he was holding the letter in both hands. And the expression on his face is one I had not seen since he was 9 years old and had broken the neighbor's window with a baseball. A boy realizing that something had gone past the point of easy repair. He said, "Mom." I said, "Sit down, Walter." He sat. "Sit down, Walter." He sat. He put the letter on the table between us. I said, I love you. I have loved you since before you were born, and I will love you until I am in the ground. But I am not able to continue like this, and I don't believe you would want me to if you thought clearly about what the last 2 years have looked like from where I've been sitting. He started to say something about Trina, about the business, about how things were getting better. I let him talk. When he stopped, I said, the letter stands. I am asking you both to find another place to live within 30 days. I will help you with first and last month's rent on a new apartment because you are my son and I want to help you build your life. But not like this. Not here like this. There was a long silence. Len Walter said, she's not going to take this well. I said, I know. Trina did not take it well. There were 2 days of cold silence. One dinner where no one spoke. One evening where I could hear raised voices from their room and chose to stay on my porch with my book and my dog. Then Trina came to me and told me she thought the 30 days was unreasonable, that they needed 60, that it wasn't fair. I said 30 days was standard notice and that I'd already offered to cover the deposit on a new place. She said, I could make this very difficult for you. I said, Trina, I have a real estate attorney, 51 pages of documentation, and this is my house, please don't. She left the room. I want to tell you what surprised me most because I think it's important. It wasn't the anger. It wasn't the silence. It was Walter. Because on day 4 after the letter, Walter came to me in the morning, not when Trina was around, just him and me, the way it used to be. And he sat down at the kitchen table and he said, I'm sorry, Mom. I've been watching this happen and telling myself it wasn't that bad. I think I need to deal with some things. He said it quietly, like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally set it down. I reached across the table and I held his hand. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, I know, baby. I know. They moved out on day 28. I helped them find a 2-bedroom apartment in Worthington, $1,650 a month. Nice building, close to Walter's work. I gave him $3,300 for first month and deposit. I wrote it in the red notebook and then, because it was a gift and not a loan, I drew a single line through it. With Deborah's help, I sent a formal demand letter for the $4,000 loan and the $340 painter with documentation. After 2 weeks and one reminder, Walter paid it back in 2 installments. He said Trina didn't know he was doing it. I didn't ask. I hired a painter, a different one this time, a man named Curtis who had done work for Patrice and came highly recommended, and I had the whole bathroom restored to exactly what it had been, pale sage green. The cream towels I replaced at Macy's during their sale. I rehung Raymond's photos in the hallway in the exact spots where they belonged, and I stood in the hallway for a good long moment just looking at them. Then I went to the garden. I am telling you all of this because I spent a long time feeling ashamed of myself. Ashamed that I had let it get that far. Ashamed that I had smiled and walked out of my own kitchen and sat in an armchair that didn't feel like mine anymore. And I think that shame kept me from acting sooner than I should have, because I confused my patience with weakness, and I confused my love for my son with an obligation to accept anything that came attached to it. Neither of those things was true. I had a hard conversation with my friend Nadine about 6 months after everything settled. She asked me what I wished I had done differently. I said I wished I had spoken clearly the first time the photos came off that wall. Not loudly, not cruelly, just clearly. This is my home. These things stay. I love you and I want this to work, but the line is here, and I am drawing it now, while we can both still see it. Nadine said, why didn't you? I thought about that for a while. I said, because I thought love meant not having a line. I understand now that the opposite is true. Love without a line is not love. It's a slow surrender of yourself, given away in small pieces, until one day you're standing in your own kitchen and you don't feel like you belong there anymore. Walter and I have dinner every other Sunday. He comes alone and we cook together and we talk. The business is doing better. He brought on a partner in the spring, a man named cousin of his from Dayton who is good with numbers, and they've picked up 3 new commercial accounts. He seems lighter than he has in years. He and Trina separated 8 months after they moved out. He told me, without much drama, just matter of fact on one of our Sundays, I said I was sorry. He said, I know you mean that. He was right. I did. I still sit in the window seat Raymond built me on Sunday mornings. The garden is full right now. It's late spring and the roses are coming in, and the tomatoes I started from seed in March are climbing their cages along the back fence. My neighbor's grandkids came over last week to see the garden, and I showed them how to tell when a tomato is ready by the color and the give of it, the same way my grandmother taught me. This house is mine. It has always been mine. It will be mine, filled with everything I have planted and built and loved, for as long as I am here to tend to it. And I know, now, where the line is. The red notebook is still in my nightstand drawer. I haven't thrown it away. I don't look at it often, but sometimes on a quiet morning when I'm sitting in the window seat with my coffee, I think about the woman who started writing in it. She was someone who had already learned hard things: how to lose a husband, how to rebuild a life, how to sit with grief until it became something more manageable than it first appeared. She was not a naive woman, and yet she let 51 entries accumulate before she finally made a move. I used to feel embarrassed about that. Now I understand it differently. What I was doing in those months was not weakness. It was a test I kept giving Trina and Walter that they kept failing. Every changed towel rack, every photo taken off the wall, every cold fine that meant everything but fine, those were chances. I kept leaving the door open. I kept thinking that love, extended far enough, would eventually meet itself coming back. That is not a foolish thing to believe. It is in fact a very decent thing to believe. The problem is that decency without discernment becomes something else over time. It becomes a habit of looking away. What Lorraine had to learn, what I had to learn, is that integrity isn't only about how you treat other people. It's about whether you're willing to tell the truth about what's happening to you. For months, I told myself a softer version of events because the honest version was too painful. My son was choosing peace with his wife over honesty with his mother, and he was using my generosity to do it. That was the truth. Writing it in a notebook, even just to myself, was the first honest thing I did. Clarity is its own kind of courage. And then there was the question of what to do with that clarity. Knowing something and acting on it are two entirely different muscles, and mine had gone soft from disuse. The night Trina told me her guests weren't leaving, the night I stood in my own living room and felt like a stranger in it, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fall apart. I went upstairs and I sat in the window seat Raymond built me, and I thought it through. That steadiness, the ability to feel something fully and still choose your next step deliberately, that is not something that comes easily. It is something you build over years by deciding again and again to respond rather than react. I had built it, and when I finally needed it, it held. What I want anyone to take from this, if they're in a version of what I went through, is this: the line you failed to draw early will cost you far more than the discomfort of drawing it would have. Walter and I are closer now than we were when he lived in my house, because the relationship we have now is an honest one. It is not built on my silence or his avoidance. It is built on a Sunday dinner every other week where we cook together and tell the truth. That is what I was actually protecting when I gave Trina 30 days. Not the bathroom paint color, not the sofa, not even the photographs on the wall, though those mattered more than I said at the time. I was protecting the possibility of something real, with my son, with myself, inside the walls of a home that has always known my name. The roses are in right now. Raymond would have liked this spring.